bad news, bad mood.
Yeah, I love Tom McDonald, but Benjamin Lerner's here today, so why don't we play something from him?
Addiction, both my life and skinny arms were like commuter trains. Up and down tracks and repetition as the loop became too ingrained. Poison in my blood and my polluted veins. Never thought I'd make it in recovery, I was too ashamed. Sick and damaged mind playing convoluted games. Going through withdrawal didn't break me, I broke through the chains. I chased the dragon, but the dragon forced me through the flames. I burned some bridges, I'm rebuilding using truth to frame. Keep recovery close just like Rihanna with Rocky. Cause I've been sober 7 years, but I don't wanna get cocky. Cause even though I've been retired from the game for a minute, giants still playing within me, word to Barber and Shockey. And look, the game is high stakes, but I ain't Brady or Favre. And I don't want a fancy trophy with my name on it carved, because the prize is staying grateful every day I'm alive. And every night I go to sleep and get to say I survived.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Ashes to Awesome podcast, Rising in Recovery. Our podcast provides light, hope, and understanding to people living within that life and the people who love them. Today's episode is brought to you by Together We Can, where Canada recovers from addiction. That's twcrecoverylife.org. Hey, listeners. Welcome to the Ashes to Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, and today in studio with me is Benjamin Lerner, who you just heard. How you doing today, Ben? Is it Ben
Dude,
or Benjamin?
I'm doing good.
What do you go by?
You can save the syllables, go Ben, Benjamin, whatever's comfortable,
Okay,
man. I'm easy.
great. Yeah, I have speech impediment, so it's easier for me, right?
Go for Ben then. Right. Whatever works.
All right. I got to thank you for coming on, man. I quite often, I'll find somebody on the social media, somebody like, hey man, come on for the podcast. I don't get a response more often than not. And you were quick to come on. You were, quick to agree. And I got to tell you, I'm really happy to have you on the show because, I love your energy and I love what you're doing out there. So. Yeah.
I'm happy to be here, man. I love your energy. I love your commitment to keeping it real, but, spreading that hope too in recovery and talking about the family element too. I love the platform, bro. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, before we got to recording it and before we got to talking, I was reading the bio page that you gave me for the website there. And first thing that pops out at me, man, your great-grandson, Irving Berlin?
Yeah. My great-grandfather
like those songs are his, really, right?
Irving Berlin, yeah. He was a prolific songwriter, but the ones that people usually gravitate towards are White Christmas and God Bless America. And the ultimate irony of that is that some of the most famous Christmas songs and patriotic American songs were composed by immigrant composers, and he was Jewish. I'm only like 3/8 Jewish, but he was full-on Russian Jewish. Immigrated to America in 1891. He fully assimilated to it. He became as American as apple pie, and he wrote God Bless America, White Christmas. He grew up hard, living with a family of 11, 1 of 9 kids in not a one-bedroom, a one-room apartment.
Ooh,
and he made a legacy for himself with hard work, and he was not musically trained or anything, but he brought himself up through his bootstraps, and he provided a living for his family, and more than that, I think he really did what he loved, and that's what I learned growing up in the shadow of his legacy, so to speak, is that more than any Oscars or, gold records or whatever, he just really loved what he did and got to make that his life. So that was so my primary inspiration with him.
That is awesome. Yeah, I was not expecting that when I read it, right? And so, like, White Christmas, that's I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas? Like that one?
That's that.
That one?
That's it, man.
Wow, man. Wow, that's crazy. That's that's a couple of major tunes, right? Yeah.
It's a major tune.
Do you got other musicians in the families that often music a family thing?
No one on the exposed caliber of like Irving. I mean, my grandmother, his daughter, Mary Ellen Sr., God rest her soul, she passed away last year, and she was a major force in my life, so supportive of my recovery, even though she never struggled with addiction. But my mom did struggle with alcoholism, and she's 12 years sober. She helped me get sober, and they were both musicians. My mom is a jazz musician. My grandmother was a concert pianist who was told that because her hands were too small, she couldn't do it, so she ended up being a writer instead. But words and music, my dad's a writer. My dad's side of the family is more words than music, but those are the two narratives on both sides of my family. Both my parents are journalists. There's a lot of musicians on my mom's side of the family. Not just composers, musicologists, music performers, people who are in bands, like different things, but the strain runs through. It's definitely, I don't want to say hereditary because I can't prove whether it's genetic, but whether it's the influence of our patriarch or whatever, it all kind of tapers down.
You know what? I got to say, to me, I'm going to guess genetic, right? Just because, I see one of my very, very best friends in the world. All of them, right? I walk in and there's a cousin I've never met, and he's playing the guitar and he sounds just like the rest of them, and I'm like, come on, you can't tell me that's not genetic, right? Like,
maybe so. I like that, man.
Yeah.
Let's call it genetic today. Yeah. Whatever it is, I like that. I'm gonna start calling it genetic. Changing the game.
I love it. Yeah. So, so for the people that haven't seen your reels and all that yet, and there'll be some of them, but I came across them. You've got this crazy thing going on where you're kind of telling your story. I don't want to tell it for you. Can you tell us about that? About what you did tell me, but tell the listeners.
So in terms of you mean in terms of how I decided to get going on the reels?
Yeah, because that's how we all know you now. So maybe that's a good place to start.
For sure. Right? And this is so nuts, man. Like I just hit 100, and I swore when I started this I would never, but it's just mind-boggling to me because I know. When I first started this, I didn't think anybody was going to listen, and now it's a drop in the water. There are creators with tens of millions of followers, but I started out with when I started getting serious about social media, combined all platforms, 1,500 people, and now 8 months in, it's 100,000, and I don't know how it happened, but the way it happened is that before I started making social media posts and reels religiously like I do now, 2 reels, at least 1 post a day, 1 live a week, in addition to these appearances. I was working as a recovery advocate for a long time. I got sober in 2016, back when recovery social media was not what it was today. Recovery reels were not a thing, and reels in general were not a thing. The platforms weren't like how they are now. And so I spent the first 3 years of my recovery getting my life back together. I worked in the service industry. I regained the trust of my family. I started working at treatment centers. And serendipitously, about 2.5 years in, I met this dude when I was working on music, because I made music and active addiction for a long time. And I didn't hang it up in recovery, but I prioritized my recovery in my life for the first 2.5 years. And I knew that I should have. But I never stopped making music. And I started making music that combined classical piano and hip hop together the same way that I do now. And my dad gave me a house up in Vermont that he built with his bare hands, funnily enough, near the Canadian border, where I live now. And he gave it to me, and I was up there visiting that home, and I met a dude who owns a recording studio here. We started working together. I got an arts fellowship in Vermont. I recorded my first album, Clean, which told the story of my addiction and recovery through music. And then from that, he also owns tourist magazines, which is my main gig now. I'm a journalist for tourist magazines that the dude who owns the studio owns, like Vermont Magazine, etc. But anyway, in addition to writing the magazines, he said, we'll let you write for the magazines, sure, but we also want you to write a weekly column about your experiences in recovery. And so I did that, and then I started a radio show called Clean Jams on a local radio station. And the point is, I never thought, even with all that recovery advocacy work, because I didn't get sober at a time when recovery social media was popping the way it is now. I didn't even know about the recovery reel universe until last year, when I stumbled across a couple of Rachel Elizabeth, Sonia Johnson, Quinn Lapierre, Jimmy McGill, all of these incredible recovery content creators. And there are too many to name, but those are a couple that stood out to me. And I was like, maybe I could do this. And so what I ended up doing, as you said, is I told it chronologically, because, I started making just random reels in the beginning. But when it started gaining momentum, I was like, I want to be able to tell the story of my recovery, but do I just jump in now and then just kind of sporadically jump around? And I was like, nah, because the columns that I had already written, separate from any social media, told my story of recovery weekly. So I used the columns as an anchoring base to tell my story, through which it led to other reels. But it's basically from the day that I decided to stay in rehab and really chase recovery the same way I used to chase dope, up until now. And I'm 7 years sober in the real world, but in my real universe, it's funny because I'll make a reel about having my second sobriety. Yeah, real versus real. Exactly. I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. But I'll drop a reel saying, oh, my 2 year sober anniversary, this is what happened. And people will be like, congrats on 2 years. And when I first got started, I was like, oh, well, I'm really 7. Now I don't tell them, because if they want to think that that's where I'm at now and they're just coming on, then my job is done, because I want them to be on that journey with me and the people who watch it to go along.
100, man. 100. That is, like I said earlier, it's genius in not just, I mean, obviously, it helps you be successful, but so much more than that, the way that it draws people in to help, right, and to inspire is I am left absolutely awestruck by that, and I think that's just absolutely incredible, man. Yeah, right. So, and anybody that is listening, if you haven't checked them out, make sure you do. I mean, there'll be links in the show notes and all that to you for to check it out as well. But there's also a really cool bio that when you click his picture on the episode there, you'll be able to pull it up and see. There's some neat stuff in there, man. In the end, this radio show, sober radio, sober rap, sober hip hop.
It's recovery rap.
On August 17th and 18th, the Mission Community Services Society is going to be holding a fundraiser called the 24-Hour Homeless Fundraiser. 10 participants will go unhoused for an immersive experience of being homeless as a way to raise awareness and funds for Mission's new community medical mobile unit, the MMU. I talked to Nate at MCSS about this fundraiser, and here's what he had to say.
So we send them out and say, well, go find a job. Well, without ID, how are you going to get hired? You have a resume, but you have no way to get your resume right now, so I don't know what you're going to do, but you still got to go look for work. You've got to find an income. Talk to income assistants. Ask them how you get income assistance when you don't have ID.
Yeah.
Right? And so people start to recognize, like, it's not as simple as get a job.
It's really not. I have some resources, I have some family that was helping me out, and the frustration almost broke me when I came in from active addiction.
So that's what the fundraiser is for, is to keep that medical mobile unit on the road. But it's also for people to have a real in-depth look at homelessness and just see how tough that struggle is when you're trying to get out of it.
And it's inviting people on to talk. I need to get you on there, man. I need to return this favor. I'm stoked about this podcast. We need to get you on there too, because I invite people on to tell their stories, and I play music in between. Like in sets, like from sober artists.
It's a podcast.
It is a podcast that is broadcast on the radio. Not every episode has a guest. Past couple weeks, I've been working on my journalism stuff, so I haven't had any guests. I'm trying to get back on that. But it's either all music sets and me talking in between, talking about recovery and what the songs mean to me. But more often than not, when I can, I get people in for 3 5-minute interview segments, each interspersed between a set, and we get to talk about their story of recovery, and they get to share. So it is kind of a podcast format, but it also has music, and it's broadcast on an FM station.
And is it also recorded and published like a podcast, or is it?
I've talked to my producer.
Radio?
I've talked to my producer about doing some of the interviews like a podcast. We have them up on Mixcloud, but the sad thing about podcasts is that if you're gonna play a lot of songs that are BMI ASCAP, it's one thing to just use music in the beginning, but
there's
for
that.
A little clip, they're not gonna get after you for that until you get start making Joe Rogan money. But if you really have a musical component of it and you're getting people on there, the law gets a little
that'll get crazy and greasy and probably not even worth it, right? But
just releasing the interviews as a podcast. I've been talking with them about it,
why not?
There's a lot of
right?
great content there.
Interviews. No kidding. It makes me think of something. So we have the Memorial Mondays. We just did our first video one because we just recently moved to video as well as audio, right? There's a funny story about that too. But what we do is I would let the person submitting on behalf of the person that passed pick the outro music, right? So whatever song, generally that's the song that was played at their service, but whatever. And then after we did my first 12 of them, I made an episode of all 12 songs, right? With some history about what each episode or whatever that one was attached to. And one of my he was a partner at the time in this whole thing. He lost his mind. He was like, "You can't do that. They will sue us into oblivion," right? Oh my God, right? I said, "Buddy, by the time these guys notice us, they'll just tell us to take it down, and I'll be okay with that," right? So I don't know.
It gets weird. It gets weird with those licensing things.
Yeah, I know, and it can, right? And I figured, whatever. If you're going to come in and tell me to take it down, I'll just take it down, right? That'd be easy. Yeah. But by the time I'm big enough for those guys to notice me, that's okay too,
problems.
right? Right?
You got other things you got to think about.
It will have done its job by then. It can go away, right? So
exactly.
That's kind of how I looked at it. But content creating thing. So there's something that it's totally not about recovery at all, but this is a kind of weird thing, and I don't often talk to other content creators because we're all busy doing what we do, right? Creating content. So getting people to share it that are close to you, and I just want to ask, anecdotally or whatever, how was that a challenge? Is that something you even noticed? Is it something that hit your radar? Was that a frustration?
So here's the crazy thing about it for me, man. A lot of the people who supported my recovery didn't want to support my recovery content. Like I love them, but they're just like, like they would rather share like both sober people and otherwise. They don't want to get behind me because they don't want to be like associated until it gets big. And now some of my friends and collaborators share it. But the crazy thing about Reels and social media, man, is that I don't even really go on my private Facebook anymore. Not because I don't want to, just because I'm always on like the other one because that's my biggest platform. But most of my friends, like the first time I posted a reel that like, I don't want to say viral because viral videos have like 100 million now, but the first one that, you know, got a couple million or whatever, like
viral to you, right? Yeah.
They were surprised. They were like, you're doing this? And I'm like, but the point is like, the great thing about it is having that family promotion is so essential, especially when you want to like build a community-based thing. But I had already kind of done that with like my local column and all that. And the people, they supported that. But when I started making like, you know, internet stuff, it's not that they didn't support it. It's that the algorithm makes it so that everyone has their like real universe. It's weird how it creates that thing. So I would share something and it'd be like, this is cool, but it's not. But then like when it started getting bigger, they're like, oh, you're really like, you know, doing this. So then they started sharing it. But the thing that made it, regardless of, and the same principle applies to online content or like, you know, columns or radio or podcast or whatever. I try to make it so that people, regardless of whether they're family, they're friends, they're people I've never met before, will understand that this is something that is more than that. I don't want to say this sounds pretentious to say, but I try with my content to make it something that is bigger than my story. That is something that everybody, regardless of the severity of their addiction, their drug of choice, anything. So I intentionally leave certain things vague. On some things I'm real about it and I say the specific drug, I say like, because that's pertinent to it, but mostly I'll just say drug or I'll say drink, or I keep it very, very open because I want
which
people
is
to be
wise
able to,
for sure, right? Yeah, absolutely. When my first kick at the can at recovery, I started this blog, so I guess it'd be actually something similar to what you were doing there. Day 5, I had like 7,000 views. I was like, what the fuck happened here? Like, it was just like, whoa, man. Like, it was a big deal, right? But I think similar to yourself, I found myself connecting with the families of, you know, because let's face it, a lot of people in active addiction are, you know, they're out there using, they're grinding. We know what that's like. We're not paying attention to any sort of regular release of anything, right? You're too busy getting your hustle on, right? So I kind of came to that reality right away. But his mom is, and his mom would sure like to know what the hell, like why he thinks the way he does and why he does the things he does. And maybe I can help her, give her some respite from the guilt that comes from that. And so, I kind of started kind of connecting with them, which is why our show does what it does now, right? But that same idea is trying to spread it out a bit more than that. But this isn't my story. So
it's amazing to see that the families connect. I've connected with a lot of people in, you know, active addiction and recovery through the inbox and through the comments. And a lot of them have been family members. And it's so important, as we were talking about before the show, to highlight the families and the communities, because addiction isn't just the disease of a person, substance use disorder, whatever you want to call it. I say addiction because that's simpler, whatever you want. We did
a whole episode on that, actually. Right?
Yeah. And if someone tells me that they don't want me to call them an addict, I'll be like, I'll call you a person in recovery. But for me, whatever, like when people say you should not call, I'll be like, bro, I'm going to call myself what I call myself, because that's how I get through it. And that's my deal.
The whole world gets to call themselves what they call themselves.
Right.
It's so
and my whole thing is like, I'm trying to be respectful of everybody. If they're like, I don't want to be, that's cool. But the point is like the same way there is the stigma around people with addiction, people with substance use disorder, there is an unseen stigma, an unreported stigma on their families that I don't think gets addressed. And you were saying that too. And they deserve just as much healing. And I've learned about it through the work that I've done, more than I ever would have learned about it otherwise, because I'm so entrenched in recovery that prevention, family stuff, that's just not as much on my radar. But I'm so blessed to have these people who are equally as brave as people who are in recovery from addiction or active addiction sharing their stories. And I'm so thankful to have made those connections.
When we relapse, however you want to use, words matter, but we get a break from it all. They never get a break. Like, they never get a break. Nope. When you're out there relapsing, they're stressed. When you come back, they're stressed. Like, they've got this trauma building throughout the entire process, whether you're a husband or a wife or, a son or daughter or whatever, a sister, brother. And it's just this constant, they were conscripted soldiers in that battle. right? And they
I
don't
love
get a
that
choice in it,
phrase.
right? You know,
Wow.
it's one of my
That's
I
vivid.
coined that one pretty early, right? But
Scripted soldiers, man. Wow.
yeah, right.
That's
And they
poetic.
really truly are. Can you imagine, right? You know, and I know my mother and I's relationship became very, very strong.
Yeah.
When I finally made it real, right? When I was like, okay, this is enough, right? And my mom is a huge part of the show, Ben. She's
That's
like,
awesome.
oh man, she's, you know what? I'll tell you about a couple quick elements.
So cool, man.
So you see the "You Are Loved" text balloon there, right? In the logo. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Mom, she'd end every conversation with "You are loved," no matter how ridiculous I was being, no matter how insane I was being. It always, and then the odd random, you know, "You are loved," she'd sneak that in there too, right? We wouldn't have talked for months, and she just let me know I was loved. So the day I knew I was ready, there she was. Like I knew she was there. You know what I mean? Like, and I felt okay making that call, right? You know, right? So, and now Mom and I's relationship is huge, man. She's awesome, and
Me too.
she supports a lot of people in the world now, right? She's kind of everybody's mom for a minute sometimes, man. I think, right? Yeah. And now for a quick PSA brought to you by
Revolution Recovery, helping men recover and become their best selves through support and treatment. They've been there and they understand.
Hey everyone, this is Ryan Bathgate from Kaleidoscope Wednesdays. I wanted to bring a public service announcement to you today about Narcan, or also known as naloxone. These kits have saved so many lives over the years. I can attest for that. Being in the industry for so long, I can tell you since we've had the opioid crisis declared in 2016, it has saved thousands of lives, and I've watched it personally save hundreds of lives. These kits are small, easy to use. You can keep them in your glove box or in a cupboard in your home, and you never know when somebody's going to need them. If you have a hard time finding a Narcan kit in your area, just email us here at ashestowasomepodcast@gmail.com. Throw Narcan in the subject line, tell us where you are, and we'll do the legwork to find that for you. If you wanted to send me a question for my Kaleidoscope Wednesdays, again, email ashestowasomepodcast@gmail.com. We will read that question on air, and I'll do my best to answer it in a comprehensive way. That's all I have for now. We'll go back to the show. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, so I'm pretty proud of that.
It's so cool that she plays a part. My mom too.
Yeah.
She's in recovery, and she was one of my primary inspirations. And
do you
she
guys
also
do any
writes
like
about
collabs
recovery.
that have gone public with?
We actually did a song on my first album.
Which
we
one?
did a song together. It's called "I Surrender," and it's mostly her actually. I come in on like the first and last like hook is like ad-lib vocals, but it's about the night that she realized that it was up to me to get sober in the worst days of my active addiction. And
I can't believe I missed that one, man. Right? I thought I heard the whole album.
I didn't like write it as featuring Mary Ellen Lerner, who's my mom. We just put the song there, and it was kind of intentional that we didn't want to like really make it that real, but I wanted to at first, but I also wanted to kind of like not make it too much of a talking point. I just focus on the song, but it's her. It's my mom singing it, and it's a true story about like when she saw me come home and she knew that it was just hopeless and that it was up to me, that she couldn't do anything. But we're both in long-term recovery now, and I'm so grateful that she never she knew that I had to do it on my own, but she was there on the other side when I got sober, and she never left me in active addiction. She never kicked me out, but at certain points she's just like, it has to be you who wants this. Right. And then on the other side, she supported me, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. No kidding, man. No kidding. It's we call that the love bottle on the show. We've right. Perceived lack of connection, and if you can agree with this or relate to it at all, I don't know. Perceived lack of connection for me was the boot on my neck for the last 2 or 3 years in addiction, right? It wasn't even the lack of connection. It was because I thought there was lack of connection. That was it. But hey, your perception is your reality, right? So
it's true.
That was the boot on my neck for the last couple of years in addiction, right? So we talk about it often, the don't pick up the phone thing until they're ready. Like, no, I don't believe in that shit. I don't believe in it at all, actually. I'm pretty, right? I try and stay neutral on most issues. When it comes to that, it's like, no, pick up the phone. Right, absolutely. If they're calling,
I would say so.
Right?
Unless it's dangerous, like unless they're like threatening you or whatever, then you got to do a firm boundary. But if they're desperate, whether it's a friend or a family member, I'm always going to be there to pick up the phone.
Damn straight, man. Damn
unless
straight,
it's threatening me or my family, then like.
Of course, you got to look after you and yours, right? And one of the mothers in one of the episodes was guilt-ridden over helping her son eat. Well, I was enabling him. You were feeding your son, right? Like that's all. That is not enabling in my mind, right? That's feeding a human being who you gave birth to. I mean, geez, right? Like
I think that people get a little wrapped up in extremes. Like it's like no enabling or total. I think every situation is nuanced, and that's uncomfortable. I think people don't want to have nuance. They don't want to address the real situational complexities. So they come up with these strict rules and don't understand that recovery and addiction and the way they intertwine, harm reduction, all those things are malleable, very subtle, nuanced shades of gray things. And it's so hard to pick which one's going to work for each person. Is it going to be tough love? Is it going to be compassion? Is it going to be openness and acceptance? Are you enabling too much? But the way I say it, if someone asks me, how do I know if I'm enabling or I'm helping? How do I know if I'm being too harsh? You communicate and you see the response and you see what happens and you do your best. Right. And there's no perfect solution, but I agree with you, man. Keeping I go towards the compassion and the, you can call it enabling, you can call it help side, but we're simpatico on this one, man. We're in the same,
yeah, right. So
same lane.
The rooms you were in the rooms. That's what got you there, or are you still doing?
I do not talk about fellowship stuff.
Okay.
No,
cool.
I'm not. I don't. But see, you know what? Let me say this.
Okay. Yep.
The reason I don't is because people get so weird about it, man. They get so tradition heavy. Here's what I'll say. Yeah. There are some wonderful people who are very involved in recovery, who have played a foundational role in my recovery, that meet often, and I am part of that, and they taught me a lot of great things, and I am still part of that, and I am grateful for it. And separate from any fellowship, that type of unity and togetherness and working of separate from fellowship, just I believe principles of recovery: acceptance, surrender, detachment, healthy boundaries, inventory, amends, like all of those things I think are at work in everybody's recovery. And I'm sorry I'm like, I'm not gonna, it's not that I don't want to.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
it's just that people, especially in America, get so hardcore about that.
The most polarized country in the world.
Yeah,
right?
they're so hardcore about it, man. And I do not want to step on anybody's toes. And the irony is that,
mindful of it, right?
Yeah. I don't even say the word fellowship. I don't say meeting. I don't say any of the key words, but people still say you're breaking enemy. And so I just had to completely just go
That's fair.
Level DEFCON 5, just because when people say that, I'm trying to help, but some people are gonna misinterpret it as me trying to represent a fellowship. And I have so much love for all forms of recovery, all fellowships, but it got to a certain point. Is one of the social media thing where I got hundreds of comments. I was just like, y'all are out there. I'm taking
it's not the hill I'm going to die on, right? Yeah,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. We've
for sure.
Right from day one, I've kind of had this open policy. Hey, come on, and talk about whatever.
Right.
And it's got me. I've had a little bit of pushback here and there on it, right? But
I think it's
we're
up to
Canadians.
people.
We're just always polite to each other, right? So
if you want to share about it, you know what I mean. That's cool.
Absolutely, right? Yep.
I don't not support people sharing on it. If you want to talk about being in a fellowship, I have no problem with that. It's just so many people have had a problem with me doing it that I'm just like,
don't pick the fight, right? So
exactly.
And for myself, I'm not a 12-stepper anymore, but I can tell you, the first 30 days don't happen without it. There is no way in hell that I make it through that first 30 days without the rooms, right?
It's a valuable resource.
Right?
It is a valuable resource.
And it's funny because the people that are most outspoken against generally are only sober because they were there. It's like you're only having this conversation because you're in the rooms.
It's
right?
true.
It's
a powerful
You wouldn't even be sober enough to do this right now, man. Right?
It's true.
It's
true.
So,
and no program's perfect, but it's helpful. It can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we'll leave that topic alone. Right.
It's all good, man. I don't mean to be whatever. I'm just trying to keep the peace.
I I do want to talk about a sponsor real quick here. We got to do that, right? For the,
For sure.
keeps the lights on. So in my active days, just in the last couple of years, so I went 20 years, no violence, nothing, ever. And then in the last like 3 years, things went really, really bad. Meth and fentanyl came on the scene, right? And they together, the perfect storm. You got one drug people do anything for, and another drug keeping them awake for 2 weeks at a time doing it, right? And it's like the violence, at least in my part of the world, it went from none to things got really bad, really bad. So I had my smile knocked out of my face. I came out of my house, bat to the face, gun to the head. It was an extremely violent and horrible thing to go through. And I had my front teeth knocked out. And when I started the show, I'd reached out to this company called Dent Kits, and I can do this so authentically because I love what they've done. Dentkits.com. They're out of Las Vegas. So we just come on as a sponsor since. They do mail order. You send the molds through the mail or whatever, get it back to their place. $600 gets you a full set of dentures, and then they just get cheaper from there. $600, full set, perfect fit, can eat all the things with them, if you can imagine that, right? So for me, what that said was a mother can now get her son's smile back for him when he gets, you know what I mean, when they're sober, or a guy can, it makes it affordable. And I don't know, like up here in Canada, full set of dentures, if you find them for less than $5,000, I'll punch myself in the face right now. Like there's just no way, right? So, so for that price, the whole world opens up. Every time I looked in the mirror for 3 years, I relived that shit, right? Every single time it was horrible, right? And then your self-esteem goes to shit, all of that. I put this, I got the top set in now. When I put it in 6 weeks ago, and one of my best friends, Carl, will tell you, totally everything in my world changed. Everything. I looked in his truck, it was in his truck, and I looked in his rearview mirror, and I started crying, and my whole life is so much better because of it. I wouldn't do video episodes until I took care of that. There was no way. So that's why we do video episodes now, right? Because I got to get this. So it's dentkits.com, and we don't have the promo code set up. We weren't expecting to do this right away, but I got to take the opportunity to plug him because I believe in the product so much. Like, just he's an amazing, my whole world changed, right? So yeah, right, yeah.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, right.
Teeth stuff is for me too. These are fake teeth, and I got it done a couple years sober, and I had to learn, live that time, be okay with the fact that my teeth were messed up here, but I'm grateful that I was able to find someone who could help me. So thank you for speaking on that. I made a reel about that too.
Did you? I haven't seen that one. Right? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you've mentioned that I haven't heard a reel about because I've been watching a lot. So
it was early on, man. It was early on, but it was a fun one for me to talk about. I was grateful to be able to talk about that because I think it's something that not enough people talk about, like the self-consciousness that goes with like building yourself back up physically as well as mentally and emotionally, and dare I say spiritually in recovery. It's multifaceted and it all plays together.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. For me, I'd be able to kind of put that trauma, like not see it all the time, every time, right?
Yeah.
Even when we were recording an audio episode, we would still have what you and I have right now, this, the cameras just to have a conversation. Right. And I'd have to put something in front of my face on the screen because I couldn't stand looking at it, right? I was so shitty, right?
And with the traumatic
feel that way about ourselves, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
no, it must be so freeing, man. I'm so happy for you. That's awesome.
I just... that is something I'll crack a tear about for years, I'm sure, because it was pretty cool. So that's dentkits.com. Yeah, absolutely.
Big ups.
So let's go back then. You want to tell us your story? Like, we don't need to get all the greasy details. You want to really hear the story, go back and listen to all the fucking reels, right? But
it's true. It's true, the reels. But I gotta take my kid to the park in 15 minutes or so I'm gonna give you the Spark Notes version and we can get into it.
Absolutely.
Because before I tell this story, I always tell the story the same way. My followers will probably get sick of this because I've done it in my own lives a couple times. I was an addict and an alcoholic before I took my first drink. And what that means is I was always looking for an external solution to an internal problem. Now, what was the internal problem? I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Back then it was called Asperger's, but I was diagnosed by several specialists when I was 3, 7, and then 13 years old. And what that means is that sensory overload, meaning sound, sight, but more than that, physical interaction, the sum of all that when you're interacting with other people made me feel empty, scared, like I couldn't connect, like I didn't belong. It was nothing my parents did. They did get divorced. There was a little bit of instability there, a little bit of emotional and tiny bit of physical abuse with my mom's boyfriend after she separated from my dad. A little bit of emotional stuff there, but my parents were wonderful people. I grew up with privilege. I like to say we didn't own the shopping mall, but we sure as hell shopped there. There was no days I went hungry, but even still, my parents could not shield me from my own emptiness and my own inner turmoil and my own need to find an external solution. And it started out with things that had nothing to do with drugs, Pokemon cards, video games, approval from people, trying to dominate conversations and get high off the adulation and juice that I would receive. And I had a couple sips of liquor here and there, you know, a little sip of beer, sip of champagne at New Year's, both that my parents knew about and didn't know about, but it was nothing like alarming to them, just like, you know, curiosity. But over time, I started to realize that those little sips were changing my chemistry, which changed the way that I felt mentally and emotionally. And when I finally put two and two together, there was the first time I had a drink, which I consider the first drink I ever took, because I knew what alcohol did and I sought it out. And that's when I was 13 years old. I drank my first beer, and intentionally, and that inner voice telling me that I wasn't deserving of human happiness went away artificially. It was this poisonous, lucid, fake bliss, but it came at a cost. And the cost was that over the next 10 years, I progressively went down a continuous downward spiral, where even though I grew up going to private school, even though my great-grandfather was Irving Berlin, even though my parents are both Ivy League educated journalists, even though I grew up in Washington, D.C., in many ways the capital of the world, with all these opportunities, I gave up all of them progressively and went from being this, like, you know, private school piano playing kid who got into University of Miami with my parents paying the whole way before I dropped out, with a dual music major and business major thing. And it started out really suburban in high school, getting suspended from school for smoking a cigarette in the alley, you know, getting in trouble with the parents because they knew I was selling pot and, like, you know, drinking a lot and supplying parties with alcohol. I got a DUI when I was 20. I crashed in 3 cars after dropping out of school, blowing through the college fund, forging checks, thinking I was this suburban Scarface figure when really I was just a kid stealing money from his parents' pocketbook to try to flex like I'm this big man. Because at the same time that I'm insecure, I got this whole ego complex associated with the drugs, right? I think that, like, and I never had the delusion that I wasn't an alcoholic. I knew I was an alcoholic. I just didn't want anybody getting in the way of it. A lot of people are like, oh, I realized I was an alcoholic. I realized I was an alcoholic when I had my first drink, and I was like, this can happen? We could change consciousness chemically? Game over. That's what I'm making my whole life about. I had no shame in it. But I crashed my car in a multiple DUI crash when I was 20 years old in January of 2012. And my first thought when I hit all these other people, thank God none of them were hurt, is, are they okay? I'm going to jail. Like, I just totaled my mom's car that I stole from her without her knowing. My first thought was, I'm not going to get to drink and use today. And because I was so scared, more than any legal consequences, more than my family's car, more than anybody being hurt even, that I would not be able to distract myself from my pain. And, you know, the consequences mounted, and they're like, you gotta stop drinking. So I did stop drinking. I re-enrolled in a different school in California where my father had moved from my hometown of DC, remarried, gone out there, and I wanted to reconnect with him, get a new start in my life. But funnily enough, I stopped drinking because of the DUI. I was in a decent place. I was smoking a little cannabis. I have full support for cannabis recovery. It's not part of my recovery story. It doesn't work for me. I support people who use cannabis in their recovery, but it is a drug for me. It doesn't work for me. But that was the one thing I was doing. No drinking, no hard drugs. But then 4 teeth came in at the same time, the wisdom teeth heavily impacted. I needed major dental surgery, not just extractions. And the one line I hadn't crossed up to that point, I'd done coke, ecstasy, Xanax, like liquor, big time. Never did opioids. I thought I was better than that. But the one thing that happened is I got my teeth extracted, and the doctor who prescribed me the pills after was like, you can't smoke, and you can't just not smoke weed. You can't smoke cigarettes. You can't drink liquor because it's abrasive. You can't even drink a soda out of the straw or water because the suction will rip the thing out of the clot. So I'm like, you're telling me I can't smoke, I can't drink? And they're like, yeah, but take these for the pain. And they gave me a little too much of it. And 4 blocks away from the student apartment I was staying in San Francisco was the second biggest open-air drug market, maybe third counting Vancouver. Shout out to y'all in Canada. But in America on the West Coast, it's Skid Row and then the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And that's where I hit my bottom. And fast version, you know, I started out like, you know, just popping Percocets I was prescribed. Within, you know, a couple months, I was selling everything I had for Oxy 30, snorting heroin, selling heroin. I went to rehab, but I wasn't ready. I just did it to avoid consequences. And every line I said I wouldn't cross, you know, shooting dope, smoking crack, abscesses in my arms, going days without eating, showering, washing my clothes, just because I put every cent I had into crack and dope. And, you know, having seizures didn't scare me. Lancing abscesses because I was scared to go to the hospital didn't scare me. You know, my parents, like, giving up on me didn't scare me. Nothing scared me until I shot up and I didn't feel a thing. And that's when my solution stopped working. I got physically high, but I didn't get that same feeling of emotional and spiritual relief. And that's why even though I had been in outpatient rehab centers like 8, 9 times, I went for me. And that was in June of 2016 when I decided that I really wanted to go. And the night before I left, I put so much dope in the spoon that I literally couldn't see blood register in the rig when I shot up. And I made a deal, and it was like, if I make it through this, I don't want to say I was suicidal, but I was anything I could do to get away from going to rehab. And it didn't even make me pass out. I don't know if that was God. I do believe in God today. That's my spiritual understanding, but you know, or just tolerance. I don't know. But I went to rehab and I really applied myself. I put all the energy I used to put into chasing dope towards chasing recovery. I got a job. I made amends with my family to the best of my ability. I did find the recovery circle that worked for me, and it became a big part of my recovery. I worked in the service industry. I put everything that I had into recovery, and when I got the chance to, I put everything that I could into making music and making reels. And now I'm here. And I'm blessed to have a family, which allows me to go to the park. And that's why I got to get off with you in just a minute, man, because I want to go with them to the park and take advantage of this beautiful day. But let's talk for this last 5 minutes. And let's get it going, because I want to chop it up with you before I go at 3:07. Let's go for it.
Okay. He's on it.
Yeah,
here. Okay,
I got the little baby boy chilling in the clothes.
I can see it, man. I can see it. Far be it from me to get in the way of that.
Yeah,
man. So,
no, you're all good, man.
So listen. So on every episode of the Ask Us Awesome podcast, we do daily gratitudes.
Today's Daily Gratitudes are brought to you by Yacha Treatment Centers in Phuket, Thailand. They are a clinic run by clinicians, not a business run by businessmen. And they know that where addiction is the smoke, trauma is the fire. Learn more at yachacenters.com. That's YATRACENTRE.com. And now here's your Daily Gratitudes.
So when I have a guest on the show, I get you to give me a few. So you got a couple daily gratitudes for us?
Yes, I do. First of all, I am grateful for the fact that the anxiety that used to push me towards the drink and the drug has pushed me towards recovery. A lot of people say, oh, if you work whatever program right, do your therapy right, do your faith group right, you're not going to have. It's just going to magically disappear. And that's awesome for them. I'm not resentful of people who say that. But for me, it didn't go away. And more than that, it served as the fuel. The same gasoline that I used to light a match on and burn down my whole life is now the fuel that propels me forward in recovery. So if you have craving, I don't want to say you, when I have cravings, when I have resentments and anxiety, I'm like, this can either burn my whole life down or this can propel me forward in recovery. So I'm grateful for that reframed understanding that the same thing that pushed me towards the dope in the bottle is now pushing me towards recovery. Second of all, I'm grateful for incredible content creators like you and everybody else in the recovery universe who is pushing this hopeful content every day. I'm grateful for this platform and what you're doing for the families. And I'm grateful for every family and every person in recovery who is open about sharing their story. And last but not least, I am grateful that that scared little kid who used to run away with liquor, everything from liquor to IV heroin, Pokemon cards to approval, is now doing the best that I can every day to run towards the truth. And that's what's tatted on my arm right here. I don't know if y'all can see it. It's probably reversed because of the video, but that's the same thing at the end.
And of course, the final gratitude goes out to you, the listeners. Whatever you guys are doing, please keep doing it. If you're on Spotify, do the comments. If you're on Apple, do the likes and share, or do the reviews. And you know what? If you're on social medias or if you're on a platform and you see our logo, if you can like, share, comment, do whatever it is, you know what we need you to do to keep spreading that message. Every time you do those things, you're getting me a little bit closer to living my best life. My best life is to make a humble living spreading the message. The message is this. If you are in an active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start that lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call into detox, go to a meeting, do whatever the hell it is you need to do to get the journey started, because it is so much better than the alternative. And if you are the loved one of somebody who's suffering an addiction right now, just taking the time to listen to our show here, you just take one more minute out of your day and text that person. Let them know they are loved. Use the words,
"You are loved."
That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings it back.
Yeah, so I'm 27 and half of my homies are dead. Yeah, Yeah, I lost a whole lot of friends. I'm 27 and half of my homies are dead. Some of them locked in the feds. Some of them got sober, relapsed, and had to start over again. Feel like the only one left. Maybe this shit is a dream. Maybe I never got clean. Maybe I died in no deed. Way back when I was a fiend, I had to wake up and scheme. I had to make me some green. I had to do what I had to do. That means I did anything. I had to steal from my friends. I had to lie to my fam. That's just supply and demand. I had to cook up a plan so I could cook up a gram, so I could shoot up again, so I could stop all the pain, so I could quiet the voices inside of my head, so I could lie to myself, so I didn't have to change. People who knew me back then, who look at me now, tell me that I ain't the same, tell me that I should be proud. They knew me when I was down, they see how far that I came. Lately I've been out of town, lately I've been out of range. I've been busy making moves, I've been busy getting paid. People talking down my name, I got some people I know got resentments against me, but I don't respond, I refrain. Tell them I wish them the best. Hey, got some baggage that I ain't the one who could claim. I got some girls from the past who won't leave me alone, even though I'm out the frame. Liking my Instagram posts and sending me messages. Damn, that should make me insane. I got a girl on my mind, but I'ma be real, I can't do feels. I caught too many and that should do damage, so I keep my thoughts and intentions concealed. I'm trying to keep it 110, cause I know the feelings of what get you killed. I'm trying to live for my people who sleep underneath of a stone with their name in the field. I'm trying to keep it 110, cause I know the feelings of what get you killed. I'm trying to live for my people who sleep underneath of a stone with their name in the field. I'm trying to keep it 110, cause I know the feelings of what get you killed. I'm trying to live for my people who sleep underneath of a stone with their name in the field. Yeah, so I'm 27 and half of my homies are dead.